One of the most dangerous serial killers in the world broke down in tears as a victim's father offered forgiveness. It was an unexpected moment of humanity that left everyone in shock. In another courtroom, a killer arrogantly defends himself, maintaining a chilling composure even as he receives 6 life sentences. From tearful confessions to cold-hearted defiance, their behavior in court adds another layer of horror to their gruesome crimes. How do these notorious criminals react when justice catches up to them? These are some famous serial killers reacting to life sentences.
In regards to count 1, I would ask that you stand, Mr. Rader. It will be the judgment, order, and sentence of the court that you, Dennis L. Rader, be taken by the Sheriff of Sedgwick County, Kansas, and by him delivered to the custody of the Secretary of Corrections to serve a term of life for the premeditated murder of Joseph Otero.
Dennis Rader, known as the BTK Killer, which stands for Bind, Torture, Kill, terrorized Wichita, Kansas from 1974 to 1991, murdering 10 people. He evaded capture for over 3 decades until he resumed communication with the media and police in 2004, leading to his arrest in February 2005. During his sentencing, Rader attempted to feign sincerity, but his speech came off more like an acceptance speech at an awards show than a statement of remorse.
I confronted her, told her there I had a problem, sexual problem, that I would have to tie her up and have sex with her. She was a little upset. We talked for a while. She smoked a cigarette. While we smoked a cigarette, I went through her purse, identifying some stuff. And she finally said, well, let's get this over with so I can go call the police. And I said, okay. And she said, can I go to the bathroom? And I said, yes. She went to the bathroom and I told her when she came out to make sure that she was undressed. And when she came out, I handcuffed her. And I don't really remember whether... Sir?
You handcuffed her? You had a pair of handcuffs?
Yes, sir.
What happened then?
Well, anyway, I handcuffed her, had her lay on the bed, and then I tied her feet.
He began by praising the state's PowerPoint presentation. Today is my final judgment for me. The last couple of days in court presented by the state, their PowerPoint presentation was very powerful. A couple of things I might point out towards the end, that overall most of that was true. Rader continued to describe his victims in unsettling detail, trying to draw parallels between their lives and his own. This bizarre display left the courtroom in disbelief, with many family members of the victims walking out in disgust. District Attorney Nora Fawn remarked, "I call it the Golden Globe Awards." He was giving out kudos to the jailers, to law enforcement, but you know what? He criticized me. I couldn't believe it. Despite his attempts to control the narrative, Rader received 10 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would never walk free again.
I've listened to all your statements, each one of them, and I'm truly sorry to everyone I've hurt. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Joseph James DeAngelo, known as the Golden State Killer, committed a series of burglaries, assaults, and murders across California during the 1970s and 1980s. DeAngelo was finally captured in 2018 using DNA evidence that linked him to the crimes. In court, DeAngelo appeared frail and disoriented, often using a wheelchair. During his sentencing, DeAngelo pleaded guilty to multiple murders, sparing himself the death penalty, but ensuring a life behind bars. His apology was muttered and insincere. "I've listened to all your statements, each one of them, and I'm really sorry." Many saw this as a manipulative act, aiming to garner sympathy. Footage from jail revealed him moving around his cell with ease, exposing his frailty as a facade. District Attorney Anne-Marie Schubert highlighted his deceit. When you look back in time 4 decades and you now stand in the presence of 2020, you can see that Joseph DeAngelo is no different today than he was 45 years ago. DeAngelo received multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would spend the rest of his days in prison.
You had said your memory, when it comes to all of the women you took, was gone. Our memory is not. In your words, you said that They didn't mean anything to you, but she meant everything to us.
She was a mother, she was a wife, she was a sister, and we miss her.
Ridgway. There are people here that hate you. I'm not one of them. You've made it difficult to live up to what I believe, and that is what God says to do, and that's to forgive. You are forgiven, sir.
Gary Ridgway, known as the Green River Killer, admitted to killing 48 women, making him one of the deadliest serial killers in American history. He targeted vulnerable women that were often sex workers or runaways, thinking no one would miss them. Ridgway was caught in 2001 when DNA evidence tied him to the murders. At his sentencing, Ridgway showed no emotion as families of the victims spoke. But when Robert Rule, whose daughter was a victim, said, "You are forgiven, sir," Ridgway broke down in tears. Judge Richard Jones noted the significance, telling Ridgway, "If you have any emotion, you will be haunted by these families for the rest of your life." Ridgway was sentenced to 48 life terms without parole, ensuring he would remain in prison forever.
To think that this is someone's brother, nephew, uncle, cousin, grandson, or just someone's friend.
I hope you can deal with what you've done. I'm trying hard to. You almost destroyed me, but I refuse to let you destroy me. I will carry on.
You destroyed the baby of the family, and I hope you go to hell.
I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again.
I didn't ever want freedom. Frankly, I wanted death for myself. This was a case to tell the world that I did what I did not for reasons of hate. I hated no one. I knew I was sick or evil or both.
Dahmer is notorious for his gruesome murders and acts of cannibalism. He was apprehended in 1991 after one of his intended victims escaped and led police to Dahmer's apartment, where they discovered photographs of dismembered bodies and human remains. Throughout his trial, Dahmer showed little emotion, but when he was finally sentenced to 15 life terms, he expressed a rare moment of humanity.
I didn't ever want freedom. Frankly, I wanted death for myself. This was a case to tell the world that I did what I did not for reasons of hate. I hated no one. I knew I was sick or evil or both. Now I believe I was sick.
His defense attorney, Gerard Boyle, argued that Dahmer wasn't evil but mentally ill. Despite his plea for understanding, Dahmer's actions were too horrific to overlook. He was sentenced to multiple life terms, ensuring he would die in prison. Dahmer was later killed by a fellow inmate in 1994.
We're told that actually there wasn't a story for us to write about. There was no link between, at that point, three people who died, and that really it wouldn't be a very good idea for us to publish this because it would scare.
Stephen Port, the Grindr killer, used the dating app to lure and kill 4 men in London between 2014 and 2015. He was finally caught when the similarities in the deaths raised suspicions, leading to a thorough investigation. During his trial, Port displayed a cold and detached demeanor. At the Old Bailey, Mr. Justice Openshaw sentenced Port to life imprisonment with a whole life order. Port remained emotionless, showing no remorse for his actions. The judge's stern words reflected the gravity of Port's crimes, saying, "The seriousness of the offending is so exceptionally high that the whole life order is justified." Port's victims' families were devastated by his lack of emotion.
We finally have justice for our Jack and the other boys. That sick, twisted scumbag will never be able to hurt or destroy anyone else's family or life. Our Jack can finally rest in peace. We will always be completely heartbroken as a family. The support has been truly amazing. We would like to thank the Homicide Investigation Unit and everyone else at home who has supported us as a family through such a tragic time. Thank you. Thank you.
They fought tirelessly for justice, showing the failures of the police investigation that allowed Port to continue his killing spree. The family's solicitor, Neil Hudgell, stated this was the only logical decision open to the IOPC following the weight of evidence heard at the inquests last year. Port was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would never harm anyone again.
I can only imagine the pain and loss felt by Mark and Sandy Cates, and by Jake and Back, Justin's brother. I have brothers and sisters myself. I can only imagine what it would be like to lose one of them. I'm sorry that this happened. And I know that doesn't bring Justin back, but I'm sorry. I wish I could go back in time and stop this before it even happened, but I can't. I hate for any family to go through such pain and suffering as this. To lose your son, I can't imagine. To lose your brother.
Austin Myers, along with an accomplice, was convicted of murdering 18-year-old Justin Back in Ohio in 2014. Myers and Timothy Mosley plotted to rob Justin's home and ended up killing him in a brutal attack. They strangled him with a choke wire and stabbed him multiple times before disposing of his body. Myers' sentencing was a dramatic affair, marked by his desperate pleas for mercy. Myers, only 19 at the time, begged the jury to spare his life.
If you choose for me to die, it's only going to cause more pain and suffering for another family. Not me. It won't hurt me. I won't feel anything. It's going to hurt more innocent people.
The emotional impact of his crime was palpable when Justin Back's father addressed the court.
I'm not going to stand up here and tell you how much I hate you. That is without question. I would just hope that every time you close your eyes at night, you see my son Justin.
Despite Myers' pleas, the judge handed down the maximum sentence.
The defendant does not understand how precious life is.
Myers was sentenced to death, becoming the youngest person on Ohio's death row at the time. Michael Brady, convicted of murdering 4 correctional officers during a failed prison escape in North Carolina, showed a chilling lack of remorse during his trial. Brady, already serving time for attempted murder, orchestrated the attack with 3 other inmates. During the trial, prosecutors presented evidence of the brutal killings, including the use of hammers and scissors. When it was Brady's turn to speak, he showed no signs of regret, saying, "I'm up here to tell the truth. You can ask me anything you want. I'm going to tell the truth how it was, whether it hurts me, whether it helps me. I don't care about that." His cold demeanor left the courtroom stunned. The jury unanimously recommended the death penalty, and the judge agreed. Brady was sentenced to death and is currently awaiting execution in Colorado.
Truly remorseful and deeply sorry.
However, with the death penalty looming over him, Johnson tried to shift the blame to a corrupt legal system that stacked the deck against him.
The state, knowing nothing about me, would have me believe that before you was a vicious man who went hunting for human lives.
Did he say you hurt my mommy? Is that what he said?
Suffice it to say that a precious child is dead. This murder was heinous, atrocious, and cruel. For those acts, I sentence you to death.
Tyrone Johnson was convicted of the brutal murders of his girlfriend, Stephanie Willis, and her 10-year-old son, Ricky, in 2018. The tragic incident occurred during an argument over a TV remote, leading Johnson to shoot both victims. In court, Johnson's demeanor fluctuated between shock and disbelief. He tried to explain his actions, stating, "I'm truly remorseful and deeply sorry," but his apology was marred by his accusations of an improper trial. He claimed, "The state, knowing nothing about me, would have you believe that before you stood a vicious man who went hunting for human life." The emotional impact of his actions was profoundly expressed by the victims' family members. One heart-wrenching statement came from a family member who said, "The grief we feel is never-ending. Every minute of every day, we will never watch him grow up, never see who he would have become." The judge, appalled by the heinous nature of Johnson's crimes, described the murders as heinous, atrocious, and cruel, and sentenced him to death. Johnson remains on death row, continuing to maintain his innocence despite overwhelming evidence against him.
Aggravated robbery of Michael, 11 years plus 3 years for the firearm specification. Count number 11, aggravated burglary on Trina, 11 years plus 3 years for the gun specification. Count number 12, aggravated burglary of Mike, 11 years plus 3 years on the firearm specification. Having a weapon while under disability, count 21, 36 months. Count 23 and 24, both grand theft, 18 months each. And count number 26, cruelty to animals, 12 months. Counts 21, 23, 24, and 26 do not have any specifications attached thereto.
Joseph McAlpin was convicted of the gruesome murders of a couple and their dog during a robbery in Ohio in 2017. McAlpin, a career criminal, decided to represent himself in court, which led to a chaotic and contentious trial. Throughout the proceedings, McAlpin displayed erratic behavior and a blatant lack of remorse. He aggressively cross-examined witnesses and attempted to shift blame onto others, showing no empathy for the victims. His attitude was described by the prosecution as that of a demonic killer, emphasizing the brutality of his crimes. During the sentencing, counsel Mike Polensik addressed McAlpin directly.
Your Honor, from day one, this was never about vengeance. It's been about justice. I stood there on that Good Friday night as they carried out Mike and Trina and Axel in body bags. I was there. I saw the pictures from the coroner. I saw what this individual did to them, the viciousness of the crime. He is a demonic killer.
McAlpin was sentenced to death, but continued to proclaim his innocence, claiming the prosecution withheld evidence that could exonerate him. Despite his assertions, he remains on death row, awaiting his execution.
She was terrified to come into this courtroom to testify because of him. So when we talk about actions, actions have consequences. It is not the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office to railroad people. It is not the Parma Heights Police Department to railroad people.
Thomas Nuff, convicted of murdering a couple in Ohio, showed a shocking lack of remorse during his trial. Nuff, who was on parole at the time of the murders, had a history of criminal behavior, including burglary and theft. In court, Nuff's demeanor was chilling. He stated, "When you show emotion and you say you're sorry, they say you're lying. When you don't, you're a psychopath." His lack of empathy and remorse was evident throughout the trial, leaving the courtroom in stunned silence. The victims' families were devastated by his actions. One family member lamented, "My heart is broken. I don't know if I'll ever repair it. I miss her every day. She'll not get to see her sons get married. She will not get to be called grandma." Recognizing the severity of Nuff's crimes, the judge sentenced him to death. Nuff remains on death row, showing no signs of remorse for his actions.
Mr. Gale is on the floor going down to this point, isn't he?
Yes.
Okay, and that's you shooting him, right?
Yes.
Okay, proceed. Stop it. Okay, look at the screen, sir.
Yes.
That's you shooting him?
Yes.
And you admit that you shot him in cold blood?
Yes.
Proceed. And then stop. You shot him again, didn't you?
Martez Abram, convicted of murdering 2 Walmart employees in Mississippi, also showed no remorse during his trial. Abram had worked at the Walmart but was suspended after being found carrying a knife in the store. He returned with multiple weapons and opened fire, killing store managers Anthony Brown and Brandon Gales. In court, Abram admitted to all the crimes without any sign of regret. When asked if he shot the victims, he replied yes. His straightforward admissions were chilling and left the courtroom in a state of shock. Emotional statements from the victims' families filled the courtroom. The wife of one of the victims tearfully said, "You took 20 years before we had our first date, and now." The judge sentenced Abram to death, stating, "Count 1, I will sentence you to death. Count 2, you will be sentenced to death. Count 3, you will be sentenced to life in the penitentiary." Abram stood silently, showing no reaction to the death penalty. He now sits on death row, awaiting his execution.
It's cold-blooded murder. Cold-blooded murder, young man.
When I watch TV at night, it's extremely lonely because there's no one to talk to, no one to go to bed with, and no one to wake up with in the morning. And we can't forget that this is about Sheila Myers, not about the system failing Michael Swanson, and not about how something must be wrong with Michael Swanson.
You got a doctor who puts in his report that without antipsychotic medication, he's going to rob people, he's going to use weapons and commit violent acts, yet they let him out without any kind of medication. I mean, that to me is the failure of the system in this case.
Michael Swanson, a troubled teenager from Minnesota, went on a deadly crime spree in November 2010, murdering 2 convenience store clerks, Sheila Myers and Vicki Bowman Hall, during robberies. Swanson, who was just 17 at the time, showed a lack of remorse for his actions, both during and after the murders. During his sentencing, Swanson's behavior was erratic and disturbing. He laughed and smirked throughout the proceedings, showing no sign of regret for the lives he had taken. The courtroom was filled with palpable tension and anger as the victims' families delivered emotional statements. Sheila Myers' daughter, Crystal Metheny, addressed Swanson directly, saying, "You took away my mother, my best friend. I will never forgive you for that. You are a monster." Vicki Bowman Hall's husband, Dennis Hall, echoed similar sentiments, saying, "You destroyed our family. You took away the most important person in our lives, and you laugh about it. You are pure evil." The judge condemned Swanson's actions and demeanor, stating, "Your behavior in this courtroom and your actions on that night show a complete lack of respect for human life. You are a danger to society and must be removed from it permanently." Swanson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for each murder.
The defendant's commission of these 4 murders over a 10-day period is one of the worst killing sprees in the history of this state.
You don't get the glory today. I get the glory. My family gets the glory. God gets the glory. This has been too long. 4 years is a long time. I absolutely one thing to say to him, he's had power over my life for 4 years, and I've struggled for 4 years. He don't get that power today.
And his history is a very dangerous person. And like I said, that's part of this process that the court found that he deserved the maximum punishments.
Nico Jenkins, a spree killer from Omaha, Nebraska, murdered 4 people within 10 days after being released from prison in 2013. Jenkins claimed he was following the commandments of an ancient Egyptian serpent god. In court, Jenkins exhibited bizarre behavior, including speaking in tongues and making strange statements. He remained unfazed by the gravity of his crimes, even as the victims' families expressed their grief. One family member said, "You took away a loving father and a husband. You're a monster who deserves to be punished for eternity." Jenkins responded with, "I will continue my mission in the afterlife." The judge condemned Jenkins, stating, "Your actions are beyond comprehension. You've shown no remorse and continue to exhibit behavior that is a danger to society." Jenkins was sentenced to death, and he remains on death row.
He knows the devastation that he caused.
Harder to get a jury in the next trial.
Stephen Hayes, along with Joshua Komisarszewski, committed the heinous Cheshire home invasion murders in 2007, killing Jennifer Hawk Petite and her 2 daughters, Haley and Michaela. The brutality of the crime shocked the nation, and their capture led to a highly publicized trial. During his sentencing, Hayes expressed a twisted sense of relief. "I'm tormented and have nightmares from what happened in that house. Death to me will be a welcome relief," he told the packed courtroom. His words did little to ease the pain of Dr. William Petite, the sole survivor, who emotionally recounted the impact of the murders. "The impact of these crimes is like a bomb going off in my house. I've considered suicide many times. There's a giant hole in my universe." The judge, addressing Hayes, stated, This is a sentence you wrote for yourself in flames that night. Hayes received 6 death sentences, sealing his fate on death row.
I'm raising a relationship, but somehow I have absolutely don't know nothing about. And they framed me, And I was just reacting, Mary. I was just reacting. Even when they opened the door, I just reacted. I fired 2 shots, I just reacted.
It really hurts deep down. She stood in the place as my mother when I didn't have one. I truly miss my sister. I truly miss her.
We, the jury, unanimously find that the defendant, Markeith Lloyd, should be sentenced to death.
You've been trying to kill me. You've been trying to frame me for murder.
All right, why don't we remove Mr. Lloyd from the courtroom?
Markeith Lloyd was sentenced to death for the murder of Orlando Police Lieutenant Deborah Clayton. He was also involved in the killing of his pregnant partner, Sade Dixon. During the trial, Lloyd claimed self-defense in Dixon's killing and said he feared for his life when confronted by Lieutenant Clayton. However, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder, and the judge, following the jury's recommendation, sentenced him to death. The prosecution presented strong evidence against Lloyd, including witness testimonies and physical evidence. Angela Woodruff, daughter of one of the victims, provided impactful testimony that helped secure his conviction. The courtroom was tense as the prosecution detailed Lloyd's actions and lack of remorse. Lloyd continued to deny his guilt, filing a motion for a new trial, claiming juror bias and mishandling of evidence. But these appeals were rejected, and his death sentence was upheld.
One day, without you even knowing it, your life will end. And what legacy will you have left behind, sir? A serial murderer, serial killer. You ruined the lives of your family, your children, and many people in this courtroom.
A registered nurse who was supposed to be a caretaker took the life of my brother for his own personal, selfish, and twisted gain.
Charles Cullen, known as the Angel of Death, was a nurse who killed his patients by administering lethal doses of medication. Over a span of 16 years, he confessed to murdering at least 40 patients in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, though the real number may be much higher. He was arrested in 2003 after a nurse colleague grew suspicious and alerted authorities. During his sentencing, Cullen showed no signs of remorse or humanity. He kept his head down as family members of the victims confronted him, with one of them demanding, "Am I boring you? Look at me." Cullen's guilty plea spared him the death penalty, but his lack of remorse was evident. When he did speak, it was to challenge the judge, demanding that the judge step down for alleged bias. This bizarre behavior led him to being gagged with a cloth and duct tape to prevent further disruptions. Cullen received multiple life terms, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life in prison. His actions left a trail of grief and anger among the victims' families, who struggled to find closure in the face of his indifference. Mark Wilson was sentenced to death for the brutal murders of Robert Baker and Tayton Baker in Putnam County, Florida. During the sentencing, Wilson's behavior was largely indifferent, maintaining a calm demeanor despite the horrific details being recounted. Judge Howard McGillen, who handed down the death sentence, stated, "May God have mercy on your soul," as Wilson was led out of the courtroom. The prosecution presented harrowing evidence of the crime. The details were so gruesome that even seasoned law enforcement officials were shocked. Putnam County Sheriff H.D. Gator DeLoach described the crime scene as one of the worst he'd ever seen. The jury took less than an hour to deliberate and unanimously recommended the death penalty. Ted Bundy, one of the most infamous American serial killers, was known for his charm and intelligence. He confessed to 30 homicides committed in 7 states between 1974 and 1978, although the actual number of victims is likely higher. Bundy often lured his victims by pretending to be injured or impersonating an authority figure before attacking them. Bundy's trial was a media sensation, with Bundy acting as his own attorney, displaying arrogance and confidence. He cross-examined witnesses, including surviving victims, with chilling composure. When the death sentence was pronounced, Bundy appeared momentarily shocked, but quickly regained his composure. His final statement before his execution was, "I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." The courtroom was filled with a mix of relief and anger from the victims' families. One family member of a victim said, "You deserve no sympathy, only the punishment you brought upon yourself." Bundy's lack of visible remorse and his manipulative courtroom antics left a lasting impact on all who witnessed his trial. John Wayne Gacy, also known as the Killer Clown, was a famous serial killer who assaulted, tortured, and murdered at least 33 underage young men in the 1970s. Gacy lured his victims to his home by promising them work or other incentives before committing his heinous acts. He buried most of the bodies in the crawl space of his house. During his trial, Gacy displayed no remorse and even joked with his defense team. His casual attitude and attempts to appear jovial contrasted sharply with the gravity of his crimes. When sentenced to death, he remained defiant, stating, "I'm not the monster you think I am." The courtroom was filled with the families of his victims, whose emotional statements underscored the devastating impact of Gacy's actions. One parent tearfully said, "You destroyed our lives and took away our joy." Gacy's lack of remorse and callous attitude further devastated the families of his victims. He was executed by lethal injection in 1994, his final words being, "Kiss my ass." Aileen Wuornos was a female serial killer who murdered 7 men in Florida between 1989 and 1990. She claimed the murders were in self-defense against men who were trying to assault her while she was working as a service provider. Her case drew significant media attention and highlighted issues of abuse and mental illness. In court, Wuornos displayed erratic behavior, often lashing out at the judge and jury. During her sentencing, she reacted with intense anger, shouting, "I hope you get assaulted in the ass." Her volatile courtroom behavior and lack of remorse were consistent throughout her trial. Wuornos showed no regret for her actions, maintaining that she had acted in self-defense. The judge condemned her actions as cold-blooded murders and sentenced her to death. Wuornos was executed by lethal injection in 2002. In her final statement, she said, "I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back, like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th. Like the movie, big mothership and all, I'll be back." Her bizarre last words and courtroom behavior added a surreal layer to an already tragic story. These courtroom moments show the final part of the horrifying stories of some of the most notorious serial killers. Watching the reactions in court, from cold indifference to wild outbursts, shows their twisted nature. Many showed no remorse for their crimes as they faced ultimate judgment. These trials not only brought justice to the victims and their families, but also ensured these killers would never harm anyone again. That's all for famous serial killers reacting to life sentences, but if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel.